Hello everyone, welcome back to a YouTube class. In the previous sessions we were dealing on the chapter 11, that is pointers. We had covered everything relating to your pointers chapter. There is a meaning of pointers, how to define your pointer, how to declare your pointers, the advantages of your pointers, the operations performed on your pointers, then the relation between your pointers and array, the relation between your pointers and strings, the relation between your pointers and the functions, how you can pass the arguments using your pointers, that is we had seen pass by value, pass by reference and pass by your pointers, which is also called as call by value, call by reference and call by pointer or call by address. After that we had seen the memory management, that is the different memory management, memory allocation, static memory allocation and dynamic memory allocation, the use of new operator and the use of your delete operator, the difference between your dynamic memory allocation and static memory allocation. We had seen the meaning of freeze store, memory leak, and we had also seen the meaning of your this pointer. So the chapter we had completed, that is chapter number 11. Now we'll see the new chapter, that is chapter 12, data file handling. The 12th chapter, that is data file handling. So we started to study about your C++ programming. Totally in your syllabus, the C++ chapters starts from chapter 5, where in the chapter 5 we had seen the basic of all your C++, which we had covered in your PUC first year, that is review of C++ we had studied. This chapter is there for your syllabus, but we will not get any questions from this chapter because already we had studied in detail relating these points in PUC first year. So the advance to the next version of your C++ we are learning in this year. So some basics should be clarified again before starting with the new concepts. For that reason, we had seen the all review of your C++ in your chapter 5. That is review of C++. Next, this actual syllabus starts from your chapter number 6, where in this chapter we had studied relating to your OOP concepts. That is, what do you mean by OOP? Then the characteristics of OOP, advantages of OOP, disadvantages of your OOP, then the relation between your OOPs and the basic procedural concept. All concepts we had studied here in your 6th chapter, and that chapter is there for 7 marks. That chapter is there for your exam for 7 marks. 1 2 marks question will get and 1 5 marks question will get. After knowing all the detail relating to your OOP concept, then we started to know in your 7th chapter about your class and objects. We started to study the actual use of your classes and objects. So here we had seen how to define and declare your class, how to define and declare your object, the relation between your classes and object, how we can create a class, how we can create the object, then writing the programs using your classes and objects, how you can define your member functions inside the class, outside the class. That everything in detail we had studied in this chapter, that is in your classes and objects. This chapter for final exam we have for 6 marks, one 1 mark question will be there and another 5 marks questions will get. Next, coming to the 8th chapter, where we had studied relating to your function overloading. What do you mean by function overloading? What is mean by your function? What do you mean by overloading? How you can declare a overloaded function? How you can define your function overloading? That everything we had studied here in your chapter 8, and from this chapter we'll get 5 marks weightage for your final exam, theory exam, and 1 question that is for 5 marks will be there, directly question. Next we had seen the next chapter, that is called as constructor and destructor. From this chapter we'll get the weightage of this chapter is 7 marks. 2 questions will be asked from this chapter, 1 2 marks question and one 5 marks questions. So in this chapter we had seen the meaning of constructor, types of constructor, the meaning of destructor, examples, the program for all your constructors, the invoking methods, that is the implicit call, explicit call and all, everything in detail we had studied in this chapter, that is chapter number 9. So once we know the meaning of constructor, destructors, next we had studied something called as inheritance. That is in your chapter 10 we had studied relating to your inheritance. So in inheritance, one question will get, that is directly for your 5 marks. In this chapter we had seen the meaning of inheritance, the advantages of inheritance, why we need to use the inheritance. Then we had seen the visibility modes, that is public, private and protected. After that we had seen the different types of the inheritance. Those are also called as levels of inheritance, single level, multi-level, multiple level, hybrid, hierarchical, those all. And we had seen the programs relating to your inheritance also. Then in that again we had seen the meaning of virtual inheritance or virtual class, and then the abstract class. Everything we had studied in your inheritance. And after that, in the previous few sessions we were knowing about the pointers chapter. Here we'll get the weightage of the chapter is for 4 marks, one 1 marks question and another 3 marks questions we'll get from this chapter. So here we had seen what do you mean by the pointer types. Then we had seen how to define and declare your pointers, the other concepts relating to the pointers we had seen. Now the last chapter of your C++, that is chapter number 12, data file handling. These from 5 to 12, totally 8 chapters are there in your C++, that is computing in your C++. Total 8 chapters are there, but for your syllabus we have these 7 chapters for exam. This is just to learn the basics, to revise your basics which we had already learned in your PUC first year. Then, so to revise the syllabus, we had studied one more time that, and we had started to know relating to your OOP, then the class and objects, and then we started to know about your function overloading, constructor, destructors, inheritance, pointers. So till here we had studied everything. We had seen all the concepts of your classes and objects. We had written the example for each concept also. Okay, so now comes the last part of your C++, that is a little bit theory relating to your C++. So the chapter name is data file handling. The chapter name is data file handling. The weightage of this chapter is 5 marks. The weightage of this chapter is 5 marks. So here you will get 2 questions from this chapter. One question is for 2 marks and another question is for 3 marks. So total will get 5 marks weightage. Done. So as the syllabus has been reduced, maybe the weightage will change. I had given you these all the weightages based on the previous syllabus. Means when we had all the 17 chapters, that time the marks distribution was like this. Now the last 5 chapters has been reduced from your syllabus. Now the weightage of the marks can be changed. Then, but timing will study considering these only. When we'll get the new blueprint, that time again I'll revise what all the questions will be important and how the marks has been distributed for each chapter. That we'll see once again when we'll get the new blueprint. For timing, you consider these as a marks distribution for your particular chapters and you go on studying. Now we'll study the last chapter of your C++, that is data file handling. The marks weightage of this data file handling is 5 marks. You will get 2 questions from this chapter. One question is for 2 marks. Another question is for 3 marks. So total is your 5 marks. The entire chapter is theory based. What all you are learned in your C++, the streamers, the files, the data, everything. Now how we can handle those files, how we can handle those data, how we can store that data into your file, which data is called as which file, which data is stored in which type of the file, that everything will study a theoretical part in your data file handling relating to your C++ language. Done? So the chapter is theory based. We don't have any programs in this because a programmatical parts we had covered already in these remaining 6 chapters. That is, we had written the programs for your classes and objects, your pointers, function overloading, constructor destructors, and in inheritance. In your 6th chapter, we did not have any programs. There we had studied only the basic theory relating to your classes and objects, that is OOP concepts we had studied. Once we are done with the OOP concept, then among these 5 chapters, we had written all the programs. And one more, the last chapter is a theoretical based, that is data file handling. So before knowing what is there in your chapter, first we'll see what we'll be covering in this chapter, what we are going to study in this chapter, or what is the objective so that we are studying this chapter. Then, so we are learning this chapter. This chapter has been added into your syllabus to understand the concept of files. To understand the concepts of files. So we all know that there will be the files. We create the different types of the files to store the data. We know everything. Then, but how these concepts of the files are relating to your language, how these are stored, how the compilers are accessing these files, what is the use of files, which type of the data is stored in which type of the files, how to open the file, what all the operations you can perform on these all the files. So that must be known to everyone when you are dealing with the languages or when you are dealing with the computers. Then for that reason, this chapter has been added mainly with this objective that we should understand all the concepts relating to your files. So the second objective to learn this chapter is to see the usage of types of the files. To see the usage of types of files. There will be the different types of the files. So what is the use of using those files? What are the usage to differentiate into different types of your files? So that we'll study in this chapter. Next, to know the role of your text and binary files. To know the role of text and binary files. So there will be two different types of your files. One is called as text file and another one is called as binary files. Now we'll study what is the role of these binary files and text files. That is, what do you mean by text file? What do you mean by binary file? Why this has been divided as text and binary separately? How we can use the text file and binary file? What is the purpose of using your text files and binary files? That all we'll study in this chapter. Then next we'll study relating to your opening and closing of your files. That is the concept of how to open your file and how to close your files. Normally, when you are using your computer, the files relating to your Excel, Word, PPT, all, how we open those? We just double click on that file, the file will be opened. But how exactly the files, these text files and the binary files are handled to open and close, that all we'll study here. So the concept of opening and closing the files will be studying. Opening and closing of the files. Next, the concept of input and output operations in your text files. We had seen that the type of file is text file, the role of the text file we'll study, and then later we'll study relating to input and output operations relating to your text files. So input and output operations. Input and output operations in text files. Input and output operations in text files. And the next we'll study the same, that is input and output operations in your binary files. Both files we will study. Relating to your text files and relating to your binary files. Then the next part comes, that is the last part of your data file handling. Will be studying relating to the concept of file pointers and their manipulations. The file pointer concept and their manipulation. What are the operations we can perform, how we can use the file pointers, for what purpose we use, what is the objective of using the file pointers, that all things will study at the end. So the concept relating to your file pointer and their manipulation. These are all things we study in this data file handling. So the data file handling chapter is mainly used to study relating to understand the concept of your files, to know the usage of your types of files, the role of your text file and the binary file. The binary file and the text file are the two different types of your files. Next we'll study how to open and close your files. Next we'll study the input-output operations in your text file and your binary file. After studying these all the things, at the end we'll study relating to your file pointers and their manipulators. These all concepts will cover in your data file handling. So one more time I'll just repeat, data file handling is the last chapter in your C++, and this chapter has a 5 marks weightage. From this chapter you will get 2 questions. One question is for 2 marks, another question is for 3 marks. So first we'll study the introduction relating to your chapter. First we'll study the introduction relating to your chapter. So before studying your introduction to your chapter, that is data file handling, let me tell you the meaning of data and file. We all know the meaning of data. We all know the meaning of files. We use the data and file words and the concepts whenever we are dealing with the computers. So now we'll see the exact meaning of your data and file. Once we'll be fine or once we'll be known the meaning of your data and file, then we can study in detail easily relating to your data file handling. So in this chapter what we are actually learning is how to handle your data and the file. How to handle your data and the file. So the meaning of data is nothing but the data is your raw facts and figures which don't have any exact meaning. The basic concepts or the basic elements which don't have any exact meaning, that is called as your data. So the examples we can give you, any examples you can take, just your roll number and name will be the data. When we'll give you in detail all the data relating to you, that will be your information. So in your PUC first year you have studied the meaning of your data. The basic fact and figure which don't have any exact meaning, that is called as your data. A raw fact or figure or the raw elements or basic elements, those all are called as your data. The next comes is file. What do you mean by file? We had seen the image files, we had seen the PDF files, we had seen the Excel file, Word file, PPT file, your music files, your video file, everything we had studied. We know the file. We had seen the C++ programming files, everything we had studied. But what do you mean by the file? The file is nothing but the basic unit of storage. The file is nothing but the basic unit of storage in the computer system. In the computer system, and it is used to store the large collection of the data. It is used to store the large collection of the data. It stores data and information permanently for future use. What we use, for what purpose we use files, and what do you mean by the files? The files is nothing but the basic unit of the storage. When all you want to store any type of the data or any type of the information in your computer system, then we use that concept. When we use the unit, that unit of the storage is called as your file. When all you want to store any data, when all you want to store any information, there we use a concept or a unit that is called as your file. The storage of the file is used to based on what quantity you want. You can have a small storage file also. You can have a large collection of storage file also. There is no any limitation. You can create your own file based on how much data you want to store. If you want to store a small quantity of the data, that is also fine. If you want to store a big, large collection of the data into your file, that is also fine. A file can be of few bytes also. A file can be of a big MBs or GB format also. So one example I can give you is if you open your Word file and if you enter 1 or 2 words into that file, then that will be a few bytes. If you enter few hundreds of the pages, that will be of your KB, 10 to 20, 10 to 20 lines or 10 to 20 pages or 20, okay, that's fine. That memory is in the format of KBs. If you have a large musical files, an image file, or you can have a word file with 100 or 200 pages of the lines, okay, such files can be of MBs. You can take your movie file, that is video file, that can be of your GB file. Then, so how much data you want to store in that will be the capacity of your file. So the large quantity of the data can be stored in your file. So here the files are mainly used when all you want to store your data and the information permanently for the future use. Permanently for the future use, that time we use these files, that time we create these files. Done? So let me write about your files. Understand the meaning of file. A file is nothing but a basic unit of a storage in your computer system. Write down the meaning of your file. File is a basic unit of storage. Basic unit of storage in computer system. When all you want to store the data or the information in your computer system, that time we use some units, that is your file. Then, so here we can store a large collection of the data. We can store large collection of data. And even information. Both are possible. Then, now when you create your files, when you want to store your data or the information permanently for your future usage, when you want to store the data and the information permanently so that you can use them in the future when all we want, that time we use these, we create these files. Then, so it stores data and information. Data and information permanently for future use. Permanently for future use. So by understanding these concepts, we use of creating your data. Then, so what introduction we have in your syllabus is, we had, when we were dealing with a C++ language, okay, there we had studied something called as cin and cout. We had used these cin and cout, right, in the programs. So we had already used these cin and cout for handling your input and output operations. We have written the cin and cout in the program, in your C++ program, when all we want to handle the input operations and the output operations. So when you want to handle the input operations in your code, that time we use the cin statements, and when we want to handle the output operations, that time we had written these cout statements. So these are used to accept the inputs through the keyboard and display output on the screen. These cin and cout are used to accept the input from your keyboard and to display the processed output or processed information on your screen. That time we use these cin and cout. So your C++ language always provides you a rich set of the operations, both for your formatted and unformatted input-output operations. We had studied everything in your PUC first year. What do you mean by formatted operations? What do you mean by unformatted operations? That is input and output operations. Then, so for that purpose, your C++ language always gives you a set of the operations. In your C++, this input and output operations are implemented or carried out through your one library that is called as IOStream. that is called as your IOStream library. So there is a IOStream library which is used. There is a IOStream library which is used to carry out or to implement all your input-output operations. For that purpose, we use the cin and cout function. And when all you are using this cin and cout function or the operation in your code, in your program, then we always write the header file called as iostream.h. You remember in all your C++ program from PU first year, all basic program, or in PU second year, all your classes and objects program, everywhere we had used a header file called as iostream.h. Because in all the C++ programs, we had used cin and cout to perform your all input and output operations. For that purpose, your C++ provides you the library, a rich set of the library, that is your iostream.h or iostream operation, iostream library, where it handles all your input and output operations. So this C++ standard libraries will provide you to have a set of all input output operations that all will study later, which all are used and all will study. Just for the timing, you just remember when all you want to do your input operations or the output operations, then for that purpose we have a rich set of the library provided by your C++. Then so here these C++ input output operations will occurs in streams. We call it as streams. So stream is nothing but sequence of bytes. The stream is nothing but sequence of byte. These input output operations will occur in the format of stream. What do you mean by stream? Stream is nothing but the sequence of the byte. Sequence of bytes. Bytes means the data we know, bits and bytes. Then the byte means the bits and bytes, the data. Okay. So here, if bytes flow from devices like a keyboard and your disk drive or your network connection to your main memory, byte is nothing but a form of a data. Byte is nothing but a form of a data or your input output operation, that is in format of stream we call it as. Then so these bytes, if they are flowing from keyboard or your disk drive or through your network to your main memory, then it is called as your input operation. It is called as your input operations. And if your bytes are flowing from main memory to the devices like your display screen or to your printer or to your disk drive or to your network connection, then it is called as your output operation. Understand the two concepts. One is called as input operations and another one is called as output operation. Input operation. So what do you mean by your input operation? Is the flow of your bytes, from from a device, like a keyboard, a disk drive or a network connection to main memory. Main memory is called as input operation. Is called as input operations. So here the input output operations in your C++ always occurs in the format of streams. What do you mean by stream? Stream is nothing but a sequence of your bytes. Okay. How these sequence of the bytes are flowing, based on that we decide what do you mean by input operation and what do you mean by your output operations. So the input operations is nothing but the flow of the bytes, the flow of the data is occurring from your devices like keyboard, disk drive or your network connection to your main memory. Such operations or such flow of your bytes is called as your input operations. So just you can know or you can just guess that here the input operation is happening means the user is giving the data to the memory, to the computer through maybe the keyboard, maybe from your disk drive or maybe from your network connection. So the data is getting into your computer system. The data is getting into your computer system. So these are called as input operation. What is going to happen? Here input operation is going to taken place. Means the data is flowing from input devices like keyboard, disk drive or your from network connection to your main memory. So that flow of the data is called as your input operations. So the next we have is output operation. What do you mean by your output operation? It is in reverse. The output operation is in reverse. If your data or if your flow of bytes, the flow of bytes is from main memory to the devices like your display screen, that is your output device, or to your printer, or to your disk drive, or to your network connection, then it is called as output operations. Then that is called as output operation. Let me write the meaning first. Flow of bytes from main memory to a device like a display screen, a printer, a disk drive or a network connection, or a network connection is called as output operation. So what is happening here? The flow of the data is going out. The flow of the data is going out from your main memory to your output devices like to your display screen or the printers, or it can also go to your disk drive or to your network connections. So now the data is going out, the flow of the byte is going out from your main memory. If the data is going out from main memory, then it is output operation. If the data or the flow of the bytes is going inside your main memory from the other devices, then it is called as your input operations. So understand here, the flow of the bytes is from other devices like keyboard, disk drive or the connection is going to your main memory. So it is input operation. And here the data or the flow of your bytes is coming out from your main memory like display screen, printer, disk drive or your network connection. So these all are called as your output operations. Then understand the meaning of your input operation and the output operation. The flow of the byte is occurring from other devices like keyboard, disk or the network connection to your main memory, then it is called as input operation. Of the flow of your bytes or the data is going from your main memory to your devices like display screen or the printer or your disk drive or your network connection, then it is called as your output operation. Then understand the meaning of input operation and the output operation. So these are the meaning of your input and output operations. So here, when all we are using computer programs, when all we are writing your computer programs, most of your computer programs work with your files, always work with your files. This is because the files help in storing your information permanently. Why these all will work with the files? Because the files will help the people or the user or the programmer to store your information permanently. So the word processors create your document files. The word processor, MS Words, are used to create your document files. Similarly, your Excel is used to create your worksheet files. PPT is used to, PowerPoint is used to create your PPT files, that is the PowerPoint presentation files. Similarly, your database programs are used to create your information files. All the files are used to create or has been created so that we can store your information, the required information permanently. The compilers will always read these files and generate the executable files. We had also told you that we had seen always when we started to know about your C++, there is a object file and source file. Okay, so the source files are read and has been transferred or generated a new executed file, that is called as object files, by the compilers. Then so we see these all the types of the files, mostly those will work inside your programs. When I was dealing with your first time C++, when we had first time studying Turbo C++, that time I told you that our files will be executed. When we type the code, we save it, that will be a source code. When we compile it, it will be transferred into your object code and then it will be executed. That process will always happen. Then, so here a file itself is a bunch of bytes. The file is nothing but itself is a bunch of files where it stores some data. The data or the information you had entered in the file, that is called as a collection of your bytes, and it is stored in your storage devices. Those files is stored in your storage devices, like we can use the magnetic disk, hard disk, or your magnetic tape. Any storage devices we can use to store your files. Then so the other things relating to the file input operations or the output operations has been supported by which standard libraries, which header file we use, that all in detail we'll study again in the next class. So just timing, you remember what do you mean by file, what do you mean by data, which all are the called as your input operations, output operation, how the data is flowed, how your byte has been flowed, that all we have studied only the basics in today's class. The other parts relating to your data file handling we'll study in the next class. Thank you.